Let's show you how developers and validators can collaborate on the documentation, validation, and governance of an agentic AI system in ValidMind. We'll also show how you can then export the resulting artifacts for audit teams. On the left, I'm showing the developer view, and on the right, it's the validator. And we're picking up at the point where the developer has finished documenting an agentic AI system and is ready to submit it to the validator for review. In this example, the system is a banking assistant built with LangGraph. It receives customer requests, chooses from specialized banking tools, executes multi-step actions, and returns responses that need to be accurate, compliant, and traceable. And everything that I'm showing you here, you can generate yourself, so the test results and the documentation, using one of our provided demo notebooks or directly in the UI itself. So the current state here is that the developer has already selected the agentic AI documentation template, uploaded test results from the ValidMind library, generated additional missing documentation, and used the document checker to confirm the documentation is complete enough for review against the EU AI Act. For the sake of our video, there are some gaps in the documentation to give our validator reasons to collaborate with the developer. In a more typical scenario, you would use the document checker to resolve all these gaps before a validator ever sees the documentation. All right, I'm now going to submit this for initial validation, and then you will join me for part 2, where we look at this AI system from the validator's perspective. Okay, so now the developer has submitted the model documentation for validation, and you can see here it's in initial validation. This is where collaboration across the lines of defense becomes visible. So let's focus now on the right pane for our validator. The validator opens the submitted documentation and starts by setting the validation context. They can, for example, review the model purpose, intended use, the fact that this is an agentic AI system with tool use, and some of the test results. And ValidMind shows all the logged test results directly in the documentation. So for example, here you can see some of the output from the faithfulness scorer or response relevancy, which is important for AI systems. So this context matters because the validator is not just reviewing a static model output. They are reviewing how the agentic system reasons, chooses tools, uses retrieved context, and completes task. And jumping over to the validation report, our validator can then map and assess the testing evidence generated by the developer or through their own challenger model. To save some time, our validator has already done this. So you can see how I've already run all of this. You can remap the evidence if you wish, and you can also assess the evidence or reassess the evidence. And with evidence mapped and assessed, the validator can now focus on gaps. And for example, if we go into pre-processed data sets, we have an guideline assessment that no compliance is concluded. And to save some time, the validator has already logged a validation issue directly against the report section with a proposed remediation plan. So here we're missing evidence for pre-processed dataset integrity and quality assessment. And then the proposed remediation plan is to run some additional tests from the ValidMind library, such as class imbalance, descriptive statistics, or missing values, and to do a number of other steps. So this creates a structured handoff between validator and the developer. The developer can now go in, and you can see here that the assignee is developer. It is developer Nick and validator Nick, but pretend they are separate people, and can now address this within the time frame. This has the severity level 1 for medium, but it should be addressed. And so for agentic AI, this back and forth is critical, and everything is tracked in the same platform here on ValidMind. So the validator assesses whether the agent selected expected tools, stayed faithful to retrieved outputs, and handled safety concern. And the developer can then respond with evidence, and each exchange is captured against the audit trail. And the model developer can respond in the same system. So they can go to that finding that we just had open. There is a list of them. So the validator has actually created a number of other validation issues for this particular AI system that need to be addressed. Some of them have a more critical risk rating than others. So we just looked at M268-1 here. And there can be this back and forth where the model developer can respond in the same system. They can update documentation, they can rerun tests, they can run additional tests or provide additional evidence. And that evidence can then be reassessed and mapped by the validator without ever losing the audit trail. And once the validator is satisfied that the model documentation and testing is complete, the validation report can move forward for approval. And once it's approved, you can then export the development, validation, and also the ongoing monitoring documentation, if you have it, to pass it to an auditor for external review.